Welcome back, fellas. So, as I mentioned in my last video, this video is a mech analysis on the Gundam Ariel, the main Gundam mobile suit from Mobile Suit Gundam, the Witch from Mercury. But first, a little disclaimer. Just because I don't like this series doesn't mean I will be biased against the mechs. This mech analysis will be objective. So, the Gundam Ariel was developed from the Ox Earth Gund ARM platform, the Gundam Liferith, by the Mercury-based Shinsei Development Corporation, a dummy corporation composed of survivors from the Ox Earth Resource Satellite Massacre and other employees who fled, for lack of a better word. The witch hunt of anyone associated with the Venatus Institute, a subsidiary of Ox Earth who were responsible for creating the Gund format and its associated technologies. So anyway, I'm not sure how. But the Shinsei Development Corporation came under the umbrella of the Benerit Group and was allowed to send its prospective young employees to the Benerit Group managed Astacassia School of Technology, an entire colony dedicated to nurturing young talents from numerous companies where they would enroll in specialized courses that the companies thought would benefit them in the future. It's also a place where the companies, although technically under the same group, would compete with each other for the top spots and benefits that came along with such positions, although in reality, it's just a farce. Since the companies with the best resources and largest funds would be able to secure said positions in the academy, to the point that the top spots in the actual Benerit group translated to the top spots in the academy as the top three earners for the group: Jet Turk Heavy Machinery, Pale Technologies, and Grassley Defense Systems held these positions almost to the point of it being a monopoly, since the benefits they gained from those positions would also help them keep securing those positions in the future in a never-ending cycle. However, all of that changed with the enrollment of Soletta Mercury and Ariel, where the Ariel decimated the top pilot of the school, Guel Jeturk, after which there was this whole commotion about Ariel being an illegal Gundam mobile suit. That resulted in this time-wasting, nonsensical BS witch trial taking place debating whether Ariel was a Gundam or not, which got settled into a rematch with Guel in the next generation Darabalde, where he also took an L by getting beam spammed into submission. Then the next fight would be a Gundam versus Gundam 1, with the Ariel facing off against the Ferract, resulting in the Ferract being utterly wrecked thanks to the plot device installed onto Ariel. And yes, it is a plot device cheat that I will elaborate on in the tech specs. So I just want to get past its history first. Now, the Ariel scored a win against Jeturk Heavy Machinery and Pale Technologies. Thus, it had to face off against Grassley Defense Systems, which would be a 6-on-6 duel, but unfortunately the Ferrac would not be ready in time for the battle. Although that was a lie since the Ferrac could be seen in the background fully restored, which was strange. Everyone already knew it was a Gundam, and there weren't any other technologies installed on it that were dangerous outside of the Gundam system, which was a Gundam's defining feature in this series. So this was an odd choice by the writers, especially since Pale Technologies would recommend the Elan series look-alike to be the pilot, using the excuse that he had experience in piloting the machine and was a skilled pilot either way, in order to hide the fact that he was an enhanced human and product of inhumane experiments being conducted by Pale Technologies, which was probably the reason they didn't want the Ferric to participate, since it probably had some enhanced human-specific subsystem installed. But it's just guesses at this point. I know. I'm not supposed to be critiquing this since I already put the review video up. But these points are just blatant evidence that supports my statement in my review that the writers of this god-awful series tried to forcibly keep focus on Soletta and Ariel while minimizing any other pilot and their Gundam's role in the story. The Ferract was just wrecked one-sidedly and had little presence in the story after its fight against Ariel. The Schwarzet was well. I think I explained the Schwarzet's complete lack of impact to the story itself. The two Earth Gundams, which will be in my next video, were only there to be used as pawns by Shaddiq, and did not do anything particularly significant in the show by themselves. I'm saying this because in more popular Gundam series, pick your favorite. Iron-Blooded Orphans, Double O Gundam Wing, Gundam Seed. Even if they weren't the main Gundam, other pilots and their Gundams would be crucial to some key points in their series plot, whether to aid or oppose the protagonist. But this series comes off as glaringly forced and uninteresting due to the plot device cheat on Ariel that just destroys the balance of the entire story, where there was not any sort of hurdle that Suletta could not overcome with Ariel. Okay. Forgive my little rant. Back onto the 6 versus 1. No, this is not a mistake. It's 6 versus 1. Since at this point, the other 5 on Suletta's team were just warm bodies to fill the team count with no worth on the battlefield. No, wait, I'll correct that. Choo Choo contributed to help win. But yeah, the other 4 were just distractions from Ariel for the most part. Needless to say, Suletta's team won, even though her opponents had anti-Gundam equipment in the form of the antibody Gund format disruption system. If you want to know a bit more about this system and some other technologies in the Ad Astra universe of G-Witch, please check out my video on it right then. So Ariel was heavily damaged after the duel and was overhauled into its upgraded form, where it fought against the newly introduced Earth Resistance Gundam pilots, where Ariel managed to fend them off, and to also showcase its new feature. As a homemade ketchup maker, I honestly have no idea why this scene made such a commotion. On to Season 2. Suletta used Ariel to take part in numerous duel requests that were issued during Ariel's rebuild, and one-sidedly trashed them. Moving on. Ariel participated in the school festival event where she fought and defeated the Gundam Lifrith Ur. The Ariel was then challenged by Gwelja Turk in a staged duel, orchestrated by Mio Rene Rembrandt and Prospera Mercury, where the Ariel was sabotaged and became inactive, allowing Gwel to clinch the win. The Ariel would be later seen on Earth during negotiations between Earthians and Spatians, where it was complicit in destructive acts causing a breakdown in said talks, being piloted by Prosper Mercury and destroying a hidden Ox Earth manufacturing facility filled with Lifrith model Gundams. The Ariel would then be seen at the Quiet Zero Space Fortress, where it was the critical component of the Quiet Zero's main function, to act as an amplifier to the Permet override function installed on Ariel by way of Eric Samaya inhabiting the Ariel, which would grant the operators of the Quiet Zero Space Fortress the ability to fully control and manipulate every vital infrastructural system used in everyday lives of both Earthians and Spatians, which all used Permet in their operation. The Ariel would engage in combat with Suletta and the recently acquired Gundam Calibarn. I say fight, but it was just them sissy-footing around until the Space Assembly League decided it would be best to eliminate the Quiet Zero and use it as evidence to suppress the Benerit Group's unchecked level of influence, and fired a colony laser array called the Interplanetary Laser Transmission System, where the Ariel intercepted it at the cost of being heavily damaged along its mobile suit drone units. The Ariel, like the Forecht and Schwarzet, would be used in that nonsensical, overblown light show to generate a Permet score beyond its theoretical limits, and generate a massive data storm that shut down the laser array. The Ariel, like the other Gundams, would then be broken down into particles after generating and releasing such a massive amount of energy, resulting in its definitive end. Phew, finally. Now onto the tech specs. The Ariel has the same basic structural layout as its predecessor, the Gundam Lifrith, but a main feature that was altered was that while the Lifrith used nozzle-type thrusters located at points along its frame, the Ariel used vent-type thrusters, giving it a slightly less bulky appearance. Also, another altered feature was having the Escutcheon series swarm weapons relocated from its backpack to hard points along its frame. Escutcheon is just a fancy word for either a shield or an emblem bearing a coat of arms. More on that in a bit. Other than the two aforementioned changes, there's nothing else that was altered or added, other than having its overall performance upgraded to modern standards given that the Lifrith was a 21-year-old machine. The aerial itself was built around the remains of the Lifrith after Elnora Samaya and her daughter Ericht Samaya made their escape from the Ox-Earth Research asteroid massacre at the hands of Dominicus and sought refuge on Mercury. Although don't ask me where they got the materials and personnel to do all of that. When they were on the run and needed to be careful of watchdog agencies like Dominicus, who would have been monitoring and heavily restricting materials vital for the Gund format's construction and development. This was just plot convenience, since they needed to have a backer for Lifrith's development into Ariel. It just couldn't magically happen in 21 years. Otherwise, the Earth Resistance and their Gundams would have been far more advanced, and more of a threat to the Spatian-dominated economic blocks if things were so lax. If you're thinking that they got the resources after joining the Benneric Group, I doubt it. Because in order to join the Benneric Group, I would think that a company needed to show profitable growth and favorable future projections before being allowed membership. This was reinforced where in an earlier scene where there was a company that did not meet a favorable quota was heavily penalized. That aside, the weapons equipped to Ariel were pretty standard. A pair of head-mounted beam Vulcans for shooting down lightly armored targets, a pair of beam sabers for close-range combat, and a custom beam rifle that was equipped with its own thruster array that allowed it to move from the docking point on its back into Ariel's hands. The beam rifle had a feature of being converted into a long-barrel rifle when two of Ariel's swarm units are docked to it, increasing its range and output. A feature carried over from the Lifrith as well, in addition to generating a large beam blade. Speaking about the swarm weapons are collectively called Escutcheon, much like how Schwarzset's swarm weapon suite is called Guardian. And just like Schwarzset, it uses the Bitstaff model of swarm units. Well, that's a given since the Schwarzset uses development data from this version of Ariel. In any case, the Escutcheon series of swarm weapons is composed of 11 units and is a highly dynamic swarm weapon system with the goal of being able to facilitate a smooth transition between offense and defense, being able to dock onto the beam rifle to improve its overall performance, being able to dock with each other to form a physical shield for increased defense, being able to generate a 180-degree force field at the front of the Gundam when near to each other. This is called the PPA, or Permet Painted Armor, but I'll just call it a force field. Being able to dock with the Ariel to improve its speed and maneuverability, while also recharging and resupplying them. And, of course, being used as guided, multi-directional remote beam rifles. But such a system required a very powerful coordination management system, which in this case is the Gundam system. I'm saying Gundam system because it is the weapons application of the Gund format man-machine interface. But as powerful as this interface system is, it comes with drawbacks, such that the pilot will be subject to detrimental physical effects, which grows more serious with increased exposure. But that may not be the case here with Ariel, since the Ariel has something unique in that, for lack of a better explanation. It is possessed by a ghost. That ghost is the physically deceased Ericht Samaya, a girl that had full compatibility with the system, but was too immature to survive in space and ended up having her consciousness uploaded to the Ariel while her physical body died. But what makes the Ariel less risky to pilot is because all of the risk caused by the colossal data loads being transferred to the pilot is mitigated by Ericht's presence with her taking the strain, meaning someone could access the full power and capabilities of a Gundam without any negative effects. But only if Ericht accepts them as the pilot. It's a little like the Type E Elia Vignana system in Iron-Blooded Orphans, where there was something offsetting the risk to the pilot. In any case, Eric's presence on board Ariel gives the mobile suit one more feature. I say feature, but it's almost the same as a reincarnation cheat. Given that she technically died and was reborn as Ariel, this feature is called Permet Override, where any complex digital system that used the material called Permet in its operation will be under the complete control of Eric. Every vital system in the Ad Astra universe uses Permet in its functioning, so she could pretty much blast civilization back to the Stone Age once her restrictions were lifted. Which was one of the plot points of the story, to use Soletta and the duels at the Academy as some sort of catalyst to remove those restrictions and allow her to use Ariel without a pilot. Pretty stupid, but whatever. I hated this series for these kinds of convoluted story elements. But yeah, that's pretty much all of the technical data regarding Ariel in both Season 1 and Season 2. Nothing changed outside of boosting the overall performance of Ariel in its rebuild and adding the 2 new booster pods on its back. So there's nothing extra to add here. And the following part of the video will be used to refer to both versions of Ariel unless stated otherwise. Now onto my own analysis. The performance of Ariel could be said to be fine. And I mean just fine. It wasn't slow, but it wasn't fast either. The Ferract outclasses it in this category, even with the improvised booster Soletta and her friends managed to add on. The rebuild never got a chance to face the Ferract, but while it would definitely have been faster thanks to the inclusion of the booster pods, it's unlikely it could match the maneuverability of the Ferract thanks to the multi-vectoring blast booster system. Also, it wasn't strong, but it wasn't weak. The Darabald could be seen physically overpowering it. But with that said, Ariel has more strength than conventional machines like the Demi-Trainer. But the rebuild and the rematch with the Darabald tried to avoid heavy close quarters combat as much as possible with it. While this is partly because this is where the Darabald excels, it would also be because this is Suletta's fighting style, which is more long-range based, using the bit staffs to distract and maim the enemy while either having them deal the final strike or using them to position the enemy for her to make the finishing blow. But it could also be that Ariel's rebuild didn't add much to the structural and physical strength of the machine. Instead, it focused more on bit staff performance and responsiveness to take advantage of the improved abilities of Eric, with some of the restrictions on Eric being recently lifted after several duels. The hardware would need to be updated to better use the swarm weapons and their new improvements of generating a larger range permet override field. This was most likely the main focus of the rebuild, not so much on base machine combat performance, but more on the bits and the permet override function for preparation to be used in the Quiet Zero plot of the story. That's not to say there weren't any combat improvements without the bit staffs, such as the new Buster rifle configuration, while it could be said to be a much-needed addition to Ariel's arsenal. It was also just adding to the glaring weakness of the Ariel as a mobile suit in general. What I mean is that a majority of the combat effectiveness of the Ariel was directly tied to the bit staffs themselves. The Ariel had decent performance as a mobile suit across all parameters, but when compared to top-of-the-line machines like the Farect, Schwarzet, or Darabald, which had those as well but also had systems and equipment that gave them specializations in certain types of combat, Ariel could be said to be mediocre. The main reason the Ariel seemed to be more powerful than these machines was in no small part thanks to the Escutcheon series' Swarm Weapon Suite, which augmented whatever parameter the machine needed to be victorious in the duels, thanks to its multi-configuration functionality, as well as their unique situation of being under the control of a sentient entity that inhabits the Gund format-generated data storms, giving them responsiveness and coordination beyond what even the latest decision-making AI could perform when in swarm mode. And another major factor to the Ariel's perceived nigh invincibility was the permit override function installed on Ariel thanks to Eric Samaya inhabiting the machine. Sorry, you guys, but the situation of this character is very hard to describe. But I hope you guys are understanding what I'm getting at. It also didn't help matters that the bit staffs themselves seem to have had plot armor as well. Since in the entirety of the series, not a single one was ever destroyed, even when they were used to block the colony laser. The main machine suffered heavy damage, but all of the swarm units were intact. I'm calling BS. In any case, stripped of these non-standard, nearly occult capabilities. That would be impossible to replicate to any other machine. If any of the swarm units were destroyed, the Ariel's combat competency would drop significantly, which points to another fatal flaw of the Escutcheon series' swarm weapon system. While on paper it sounds cool to have offense, defense, and main machine augmentation functions installed on a single system, you're putting all of your eggs in one basket, since it opens up a great deal of inefficiencies in terms of limited resource expenditure and added risk. The resource in question being the bit staffs. For example, if you want more power to the main rifle or whatever weapon the machine is equipped with, you need to recall the bits to dock with the weapon. It doesn't matter if it's a few or all of them. The point is you have less swarm units attacking other enemy machines, which were probably giving the main machine more breathing room by not being targeted since the swarm weapons were distracting them. In addition, the shield configuration is the worst option of all. You are recalling all of the bits to form the physical shield, while they are generating a more potent PPA in this configuration. It's only in front of the machine where the shield is positioned. And that's assuming an enemy machine doesn't have a high-performance melee weapon that could cut right through the field and the physical shield itself. So you're risking a few, if not all of the bits using this mode, which was why it was probably done away with in the rebuild, since the rebuild Ariel was never seen using it in favor of the Buster rifle configuration. It could also be that the PPA generated by the bit staffs in swarm mode were improved to such a high degree after the rebuild that it rendered the shield configuration moot. And it looks like they decided to do away with the high maneuverability mode on the rebuild, since it now had 2 dedicated booster pods to address that. This over-reliance on the swarm weapons on Ariel was deeply flawed, even more so without the machine's unusual circumstances. But that's not to say there wasn't a way to apply this concept with less risk and better utility. To explain, we need to look at Ariel's cousin, Schwarzet. When I hear myself say it, it sounds like I'm talking about 2 girls instead of 2 Gundams. But anyway, Schwarzet had a better layout for practical combat, by dividing the roles of its swarm system bit staffs. With 4 bit staffs shaped like blades for offense, and 2 designed as both a small physical shield and could generate PPA fields for defense. The 2 defense types would stay close to the main machine, while the 4 offense specialized ones could zoom around the battlefield wrecking enemy forces. No compromise in offense or defense to be found. While it's true that the Guardian Marionette mode, which is its enhanced maneuverability mode, uses all of the bit staffs, it's not an issue due to the Schwarzet's own complement of weapons. And even without the Marionette mode, for say if the pilot chose to use the Guardian Sheath mode for the Buster Sword or Beam Gatling gun, the Schwarzet has high acceleration and speeds due to the high output thrusters positioned around its body. In other words, the Marionette mode is fine to use but not totally necessary. Since the machine had superb overall performance, and its swarm units were just an option it could use. Not something it needed to rely on. There also was one more problem with the Ariel. As mentioned in my Schwarzet video, Ariel is too reliant on beam weapons, and when an anti-beam environment is present, its attack options are limited to just a beam saber, where even though its swarm units could still deploy, they have no means of attack, outside of a kamikaze ramming attack which would either severely damage the unit or outright destroy it. While Schwarzet's attack-oriented bit staffs could still stab through enemies, even if their beam rifles were inoperable in the same anti-beam environment, since these are the blades for its Buster Sword, so they have a good amount of durability and sharpness to them. And while I'm sure that Ariel's Buster rifle could still be a threat under such anti-beam conditions, this thing's size makes it unusable if an enemy machine closes the distance. And that's assuming the output of the particle beam isn't too weakened by the environment itself. I think that's all I have to say about Ariel. In short, it's not bad, but not great either. A jack of all trades, master of none kind of mobile suit. Specializations aren't a bad thing, because it also adds more interest in the sense that it's up to the pilot to compensate for the machine's shortcomings in creative ways when an enemy exploits them. Instead of just beam spamming everything with a risk-free version of a system that carried life-threatening dangers and a ghost co-pilot, what do you guys think of this video? I know I said earlier that I wouldn't be discriminate against the Ariel, even though it made it very hard for me to not, after I listed all of the ludicrous amount of advantages it had over every other mobile suit in the series. But I think I was being fair. Let me know in the comments if you think otherwise. I'll end the video here. Till next time. Bye.